The wine in the cup before him was Falernian, 3 decades old, the color of dark amber held against the lamplight, and the senator pouring it spoke of vintages with the reverence other men reserve for the gods. Across the long table, slaves moved without sound, carrying silver platters of peacock and oysters from Baiae, their bare feet making no impression on the marble. Marcus Aurelius, reclining on his couch, did not see the banquet that the others saw. He saw something else. He saw, in his mind, the grape pressed and the must fermenting in clay jars under a Campanian sun, the slow oxidation of decades in a cellar. And he saw, too, the body of the peacock as a body, feathered and butchered, and the oyster as the secretion of a sea creature wrenched from its rock, and the silver of the platter as ore dug by men in chains in the Spanish mines. He saw the dinner as it was, beneath what it appeared to be. And this was not, you should understand, a moment of disgust, nor a posture of moral superiority, nor the private rebellion of a man who would rather have been elsewhere. It was a practice. It was a discipline he had set himself, and would continue to set himself every day of his life until he died on the Danube frontier in a damp tent 13 years later. The principle is named in his own private notebook with great economy. He calls it in Greek the practice of seeing things stripped bare. The phrase he uses repeatedly across the 12 books of what we now call the Meditations returns again and again to a single instruction. Look at the thing. Look at what it actually is. Remove from it the layer of association, of cultural weight, of inherited meaning, and observe the bare object as it stands. In Book 6, in the translation of George Long, he writes this: "When we have meat before us, and such eatables, we receive the impression that this is the dead body of a fish, and this is the dead body of a bird or of a pig, and again, that this Falernian is only a little grape juice, and this purple robe some sheep's wool, dyed with the blood of a shellfish. Such, then, are these impressions, and they reach the things themselves and penetrate them, and so we see the things what they are." You should sit with that passage a moment. It is doing something subtle. Marcus is not telling you that meat is disgusting, that wine is contemptible, that the purple of imperial office is a fraud. He is telling you that meat is meat, that wine is fermented juice, that the purple is wool, dyed in a particular way. The instruction is descriptive, not condemnatory. The work of the principle is to return the thing to its actual nature. Why does this matter? Why would the most powerful man in the known world devote his private hours, the hours he could have spent on anything, to the exercise of describing food and cloth as cloth? He tells you why in the same passage. He continues, "So we ought to do through all life, and where there are things which appear most worthy of our approbation, we ought to lay them bare and look at their worthlessness and strip them of all the words by which they are exalted." The words by which they are exalted. There is the hinge. There is the entire mechanism of the principle, sitting in a single phrase. The world, Marcus is saying, does not come to you as things. The world comes to you as things plus the words by which those things are exalted, and the words are added by other men, and the words distort what the thing is. This is the Stoic doctrine of fantasia cataleptic, the cognitive impression, the impression that grasps the object as it truly is. Earlier Stoics, Zeno and Chrysippus, had worked the technical doctrine in their schools. Marcus inherits it, but he is not writing in a school. He is writing at a campaign desk by lamplight in territory the Romans called Barbaricum, and his concern is not technical. His concern is whether he can govern justly while seeing the world as it is, rather than as the courtiers and the orators and the architecture of Imperial Rome would have him see it. To understand why this mattered to him, with the weight that it did, you must understand where he was when he was writing it. The Meditations were composed, for the most part, in the last decade of his life, between roughly 170 and 180 of our common era. He was not in Rome. He was on the northern frontier of the empire, conducting what historians now call the Marcomannic Wars, a long and grinding campaign against Germanic tribes who had crossed the Danube and pushed deep into Roman territory, reaching as far south as Aquileia. The campaign was the gravest military crisis the empire had faced in over a century. Marcus, who had been a student of philosophy since adolescence, who had wanted nothing more than to live the quiet life of a scholar, found himself a general in late middle age, sleeping in tents, riding the lines, watching men die of dysentery and of arrows and of the plague that the legions had brought back from the eastern campaigns 5 years earlier. The plague is worth pausing on. The Antonine Plague, as it is now called, swept the empire from around the year 165 onward. The ancient sources, Galen among them, describe its symptoms with care: fever, then black pustules, then in many cases, death. Modern epidemiologists believe it was likely smallpox, though the identification cannot be made with certainty. What is certain is that it killed an enormous portion of the empire's population, perhaps as much as a quarter in the worst affected regions, and that it continued to kill throughout the years Marcus was on the Danube. Soldiers died in their tents. Whole units had to be reconstituted. The empire that Marcus was defending was, in a material sense, hollowing out beneath him. He himself was unwell. The ancient biographies, the Historia Augusta in particular, describe him as physically frail. He suffered from chest pains and from stomach ailments that he treated with a preparation containing opium prescribed by Galen, which he took regularly. He slept poorly. He was, by the time of the campaign, in his 50s, an age at which Roman aristocrats were generally expected to be retired to their estates, drinking the Falernian and supervising the olive harvest. His household had been a sequence of griefs. Of the 13 or 14 children his wife Faustina bore him, only 5 or 6 survived to adulthood. He buried infants, he buried toddlers. The grief is not in the Meditations directly, but it is everywhere in the Meditations indirectly, in the constant return to the brevity of life, the dissolution of all bodies into the elements, the indifference of the cosmos to particular sorrows. His brother by adoption, Lucius Verus, with whom he had shared the throne, died suddenly in 169, perhaps of the plague, perhaps of a stroke. His teacher Fronto, whose letters to Marcus survive, was gone. The philosophers he had loved as a young man were gone. He was, at the campaign desk, increasingly alone. And he was the emperor. He was, in the formal sense, the absolute master of 50 million people. When he entered a room, men rose. When he spoke, scribes wrote. When he wore the purple robe of imperial office, it carried weight that went back to Augustus, 2 centuries deep. And the weight was a force that pressed upon every interaction he had with another human being. No one told him the truth, except a few old friends and the philosophers he kept near him, Junius Rusticus, chief among them. It is in this circumstance that he sits down at night, by lamplight, in a tent or a frontier villa, and writes to himself. He does not write for publication. The Meditations were not published in his lifetime. We are not certain how they survived at all. The title he himself gave the work, if he gave it any title, was simply To Himself, to Eis Houghton. He is writing notes. He is rehearsing. He is performing a discipline upon his own mind, in the only privacy he is afforded, which is the privacy of his own notebook. And what is the discipline he rehearses, more often than any other? It is the discipline of stripping the appearance from the thing. Consider how the practice would have functioned in his daily life. He wakes in a tent. A slave brings him water for washing. The slave is, by Roman law, his property, a human being treated as a chattel, and Marcus participated in this institution as every Roman aristocrat did. He nowhere abolishes it. He nowhere even argues against it in principle. But he does, in Book 5, write the following. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. But I, who have seen the nature of the good, that it is beautiful, and of the bad, that it is ugly, and the nature of him who does wrong, that it is akin to me, not only of the same blood or seed, but that it participates in the same intelligence and the same portion of the divinity, I can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him. The slave bringing him water is his kinsman. The senator who flatters him at dinner is his kinsman. The Germanic warrior across the river, whom his legions will kill tomorrow, is his kinsman. This is not abolitionism. Marcus does not free his slaves, but the principle of stripping appearances, when applied to a human being, returns the human being to what the human being is, which is a rational creature sharing in the same intelligence as the observer. The purple robe, the legionary uniform, the slave's tunic, the barbarian's furs, all of these are wool dyed in particular ways. Beneath the dye, the wearer is a man. Consider then how the practice would have functioned at the formal banquet. Marcus disliked formal banquets. He says so plainly in Book 1, where he thanks his teacher Diognetus for teaching him not to busy himself about trifling things, and where he thanks the philosopher Sextus for showing him a household conducted without ostentation. The banquet is performance. The banquet is a setting in which men exalt one another by means of words, and exalt themselves by means of consumption, and exalt the empire by means of display. Marcus knew that as emperor he could not simply refuse to attend, so he did the only thing he could do. He attended in the body, and in the mind he stripped the banquet down to what it was: grape juice, sheep's wool, the dead bodies of birds. This is not contempt for the banquet. This is not the gesture of a man who thinks himself above the pleasures of the table. Marcus is at pains throughout the Meditations to warn himself against contempt, against the posture of moral superiority, against the temptation, common among philosophers, to despise one's fellow men. The stripping of appearances is not done in order to look down on the banquet. It is done in order to see the banquet, so that the banquet cannot govern the seer. This is the crucial distinction. The world is full of techniques by which men are made to see what others wish them to see. The architecture of Imperial Rome was a technique. The ceremony of the imperial court was a technique. The vocabulary of honor and dignity and grandeur with which Roman public life was saturated was a technique. These techniques worked upon the mind without the mind's consent. They installed in the perceiver an impression of greatness or of contemptibility or of necessity, which was not native to the perceiver but was placed there by others. Marcus, as emperor, sat at the center of this entire apparatus. He, more than any other man alive, was its principal target and its principal beneficiary. The whole machine existed to make him appear to himself and to others as something greater than a man. And he sat at his campaign desk and he wrote to himself, in private, the instruction that the purple robe was sheep's wool, dyed with the blood of a shellfish. He writes, in Book 8, of how to consider the lives of the emperors before him. Think continually how many physicians are dead after often contracting their eyebrows over the sick, and how many astrologers after predicting with great pretensions the deaths of others, and how many philosophers after endless discourses on death or immortality, how many heroes after killing thousands, and how many tyrants who have used their power over men's lives with terrible insolence as if they were immortal, and how many cities are entirely dead, so to speak, Hellas and Pompeii and Herculaneum and others innumerable. The exercise here is the same exercise. Strip the appearance. The emperor appears to be immortal, or at least appears to be a figure around whom the cosmos arranges itself. He is not. He is one in a series. Augustus is dust. Tiberius is dust. Hadrian, who adopted his adoptive father, who in turn adopted Marcus, is dust. Marcus himself will shortly be dust. The exercise of remembering this is not morbid. It is corrective. It returns the emperor to what the emperor is, which is a man who will die, and the cities themselves. Hellas, swallowed by the sea in 373 before our common era, Pompeii and Herculaneum, buried in the eruption of Vesuvius in the year 79, less than a century before Marcus was writing. He had perhaps seen them or known men who had. The cities appear to be permanent. They are not. The Roman Empire itself, which appears to Marcus to be the natural shape of the civilized world, will not be. He does not know when it will end, but he knows that it will end, because everything that begins ends, and to see this is to see clearly. So what is the philosopher actually teaching you? Let us state it plainly, without modernizing gloss. He is teaching you that the impressions which reach your mind do not arrive bare. They arrive clothed. They arrive wearing the words by which other men have exalted them, or condemned them, or made them appear necessary, or made them appear contemptible. The wine arrives wearing the word Falernian, and the word vintage, and the word luxury. The purple robe arrives wearing the word emperor, and the word majesty, and the word power. The man bringing the water arrives wearing the word slave. The banquet arrives wearing the word honor. And in each case, the word is added to the thing by an entire apparatus of culture, of language, of architecture, of ceremony, which has been built up over centuries for the purpose of placing the word upon the thing. The philosopher is not telling you that the word is always false. The philosopher is telling you that the word is not the thing, and that you must, by an act of attention, separate the two. You must look at the wine and see grape juice. You must look at the robe and see dyed wool. You must look at the slave and see a man who shares the same intelligence as yourself. You must look at the banquet and see bodies of birds and bodies of fish arranged on metal that came out of the earth. When you have done this, what do you have? You do not have contempt for the wine, or for the robe, or for the banquet. You have a certain freedom in their presence. The wine, considered as grape juice, may still be drunk and enjoyed. The robe, considered as dyed wool, may still be worn when office requires it. The banquet, considered as a gathering of bodies eating bodies, may still be attended with grace. But none of these things can now govern you, because you have seen what they are, and what they are is not powerful enough to govern a rational mind. This is the freedom that Marcus is reaching for, night after night, at his campaign desk. He is the most constrained man in the empire. He cannot leave his post. He cannot abdicate. He cannot refuse the banquet, or the embassy, or the ceremony, or the legion's salute. His body is owned by his office. But his mind, he insists, his mind belongs to him, and his mind is free to see the office as office, the ceremony as ceremony, the salute as a particular noise made by men trained to make it. The freedom is interior. The freedom is the freedom of accurate perception. And here is what one must consider carefully. The principle is not a technique for becoming detached from the world. Marcus is not Buddhist. He is not advocating renunciation. He continues, to the end of his life, to govern the empire, to wage the campaign, to bury his children, to take Galen's preparations for his pain, to dine when dining is required, to wear the purple when the purple is required. The principle does not ask him to step out of his life. The principle asks him to remain in his life with his eyes open. This is harder than stepping out. It is much harder than stepping out. The man who renounces the banquet does not have to attend it. Marcus has to attend it. He has to attend it and converse with the senators and accept their flatteries and make the appropriate replies. And while he is doing all of this, he has to see, with the back of his mind, that the wine is grape juice and the robe is dyed wool. He has to hold the appearance and the reality simultaneously and act within the appearance while being governed by the reality. The Stoics call this the discipline of assent. You receive an impression. The impression presents itself to you with a certain force, a certain claim upon you. You may assent to the impression as it presents itself, or you may withhold assent and inspect the impression and ask whether it corresponds to the thing. The whole work of Stoic practice, from Zeno through Chrysippus, through Epictetus, through Marcus, is the work of withholding assent until the impression has been inspected. Marcus, at the banquet, is practicing the discipline of assent. The impression presents itself. This is a magnificent occasion. This wine is of extraordinary value. This robe is the mark of supreme dignity. The impression has been engineered by an entire civilization for the purpose of being assented to without inspection. Marcus inspects it. He withholds assent. He returns the impression to the things themselves, the grape juice, the dyed wool, the bodies on the platter. He acts gracefully within the occasion. He is not governed by it. There is one more thing the philosopher would have you understand. The practice does not work once. It works only by being done, and done again, and done every day of a life. Marcus did not write the passage about the wine and the robe in Book 6 because he had achieved the practice and was reporting on it. He wrote it because he had not achieved it and would never finally achieve it, and needed therefore to remind himself in his notebook of the instruction. The meditations are the working notes of a man who is still learning at the age of 55, 60, the same lesson he had begun learning at 15. under his first philosophical teachers. The lesson never finishes. The appearances never stop arriving. Every banquet is a new banquet. Every robe a new robe. Every honor a new honor. The discipline is renewed each morning, and renewed at each evening, and renewed at each formal occasion, and renewed at each private moment, when the mind drifts toward an impression and prepares to assent to it without inspection. This is why the meditations are repetitive. Modern readers sometimes complain of the repetition. The repetition is the practice. The repetition is the whole point. So consider now, as the lamp burns lower and the campaign desk grows cold, what the philosopher would ask you to carry from this. He would not ask you to despise the wine you drink, or the clothes you wear, or the occasions you attend. He would not ask you to renounce the pleasures of the table, or the use of fine things, or the practice of dining with other men. He would ask you only this: when you next find yourself in the presence of something which the world has agreed to exalt, pause in the back of your mind and ask what the thing is beneath the word by which it has been exalted. Ask what the wine is. Ask what the title is. Ask what the office is. Ask what the honor is. Ask what the achievement is. Ask, when you next feel envy or admiration or contempt for some condition that another man enjoys, what that condition actually consists of, when the words are stripped from it. You may find, when you have done this, that the condition consists of something quite ordinary, a body that eats and sleeps and will eventually die, a house that contains rooms in which the body performs its functions, a title that consists of a sound made by other men, a robe that consists of dyed wool. None of these things are bad. None of these things are good. They are what they are, and they have the importance that they have, which is the importance of grape juice, and of sheep's wool, and of the bodies of birds. And then ask yourself the harder question, the question Marcus asked himself nightly in his tent on the Danube. What in your life have you been governed by? Not because it was important, but because it had been exalted by words. What impressions have you assented to without inspection? What things have you wanted because the wanting was placed in you by an apparatus you did not consent to? What things have you feared because the fearing was placed in you by the same apparatus? You need not answer the question now. You need not answer it tonight. The philosopher would only ask that you carry it with you, as he carried it with him, through the banquets and the ceremonies and the long campaigns and the cold mornings in tents far from home, until the day in March of the year 180, when, near what is now Vienna, in a place far from any banquet, he set the question down at last.